In this video, I'm going to show you how to install these wrought iron handrails on these concrete stairs. And we're going to do it right now. This is a precast staircase, which means it's made in a factory somewhere and it's brought to the house and plopped down. It's not poured or anything like that. And this wrought iron, that's the name for this, is made for this staircase. And it's really pretty simple, but it can be intimidating and you might be a little nervous about drilling into your concrete stairs. Luckily, that's why I'm making this video, to show you that it's really not that hard. So first step is I just want to take this and put it where I think it's going to go so I can mark the holes of where they need to be. And I'll move this over here. There's going to be one on each side and it's going to go a little something like that. So one thing I want to be careful of when I'm drilling these holes and I'm putting these bolts in is I don't want to be too close to the edge. Obviously I wouldn't be like that because that's kind of an awkward lip to have hanging over, but even like this, let's see if I measure that, that's about 1 inch, and that's what they recommend, but this has a bit of an overhang to it. So the thing that I'm trying to avoid is any of this concrete breaking off on the outside. So I'm gonna pull this in a little bit. So that is about 2 inches to the front. That's about 2 inches. Double check that. And then I'm gonna check these as you go up. And that is 1 3/4 inches. So this isn't gonna be perfect. And every staircase is gonna be different. But the biggest thing is to stay away from the edge just a little bit so you don't end up breaking that concrete off. So as far as where these handrails are gonna go, it's kind of a personal preference, but there are a few rules that you want to pay attention to. The first one, like I said, is to make sure you're not too close to the edge here. And it's a good idea to center the handrails between the door right here. So have the same space here and here in case maybe your stairs are off center of the door to begin with. And then past that, it is a personal preference. So right here, this is one way you could do it where there is a pretty big gap to the house. On this side, you could put it tight to the house. But I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna split the difference. So you can see where this one is. That is plenty far back. We're not gonna have any problems with chipping concrete. And then on this side, this is as far as I would wanna go this way. So I'm just gonna pull this one back a little bit. And I'm gonna put it just about there. So you have a small gap between the house. You won't cause any water issues with it sitting tight to the siding. And then I'll just make the space between the door trim and the railing the same on both sides. So I got this one where I think it looks good. It's away from the siding a little bit, but not too far. It's gonna be, I think, 5.5 inches from here, from the trim. I'm just gonna make sure that's the same on the other side. And then I made sure that it is the same distance from the edge. There's 2 inches there. And then if I go to this one in the middle, it's 2 inches right there. And down here, 2 inches. And I ended up holding it about 2.5 inches from the front here. This step up here is slightly different. Actually, that is pretty close, so 2.5 inches. So these stairs are nice and even with the handrail. That's awesome. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mark all these holes so I know where to drill for the bolts. So I'm just gonna mark the entire hole here, right around like this. I'm gonna do that on all 6 of them. Now I can put this railing off to the side for now. Carefully. They're heavy. Heavy. Let's talk about the hardware. This is what came with the railings. You have these smaller washers bigger washers and these nuts here, and you have these expansion anchors. So the way these work is you drill a 1/4 inch hole. You need a masonry bit with a hammer drill to drill these holes. And then this little sleeve right here, basically when you put the nut on here and you tighten it, it's gonna pull this bolt, and this sleeve is gonna expand over this taper, and it's gonna push out and hold against that concrete. And that is why they call it an expansion anchor. So now I need to figure out how deep I need to drill these holes. So I'm gonna take my expansion anchor, I'm gonna put my small washer on, and then my big washer, although it goes this way. Doesn't really matter, but this is how it's gonna go in, like this. And then I'm gonna put the nut on this bolt. This is just to figure out how deep I wanna drill my holes. I just wanna have this a couple threads on, something like that. And then I'll put this in here. And another thing that I'm gonna add is a waterproofing membrane to the bottom here, just to try and eliminate water from getting in and sitting here and rusting this out eventually. I already have these pre-cut, so I'm gonna pop those on the bottom before I do this. So I'm gonna hold this here just to get the depth, and then I'm gonna measure right against here, and it looks like I wanna go about 1 5/8 inches. Technically, I could go 2.5 inches and just hammer these in, but it would be nice to have a bottom for these to hit so I know that they're all going in at the same depth. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go 1 5/8 inches on all those holes. So you can use a regular old hammer drill. Just make sure it's set to hammer drill. You don't have to use Ryobi, you can use whatever you want, but that's what I use. And in fact, I'm gonna use this. This is a rotary hammer. It takes SDS plus bits, and it's just stronger, faster. So that'll stop when I drill. It'll stop on the concrete and tell me that I am there. Let's drill those holes. So when you do this, go nice and easy. Don't push too hard with the drill. That's another way that this concrete can blow out on you. So just let the drill do the work. And this is a pretty big hole with a pretty small bit, so you don't have to be dead center, but try and get as centered as possible, and then drill your holes. Get it started. I like it. It's also a brand new bit, which is what you want when you're doing this. If it's dull, I wouldn't even use it. Go get another one. You'll have all kinds of problems. I just went right through. Now on these precast stairs, this section is only about 2 inches thick, so sometimes you will go right through, which is what I did here, but that's not a big deal because this bit is smaller. So you just lightly tap it into place, and then as you tighten it, it'll expand and stay where it needs to be. It might make it easier to get these started if you use a center punch right in the center. Give it a little tap, and that'll give a place for the drill bit to ride as it gets started. Not too hard, again. Don't want to break that concrete. Uh-oh. Hit something. That might be steel. Might have to cut that bolt afterwards. I'm gonna hammer these into place. I'm just gonna put a nut on the top here so I don't mushroom out that top, even though I probably wouldn't because they're tapered, but just in case. There. Tap, tap, taparoo. Okay, now I'm going to measure that to make sure that depth is good, and as I go, I'm going to make sure they are all the same. Now I've measured this on the handrail to see where it should be, and I want about a 1/2 inch sticking up, which is exactly what that is. So especially with this one, since it went all the way through, I'm going to make sure to measure it so I don't go too far. I could mark all these bolts 1/2 inch so I wouldn't have to measure them like this. That's pretty good. Moving on. So even better, 1/2 inch block of wood, and just hammer it until it's even with the top of this. Yeah, that's easier. Sometimes you think of things as you go. Then next time, you'll know. I'm going to take my pre-cut pieces of ice and water shield or waterproof membrane, whatever you want to call it. This is just a little extra step. You don't have to do this, but I think it's a good idea when, you know, water, especially in New England, when water gets into here, you know, it can sneak in and it can freeze over the winter, and then it can wear off this paint and rust it out, and all kinds of things can happen. This isn't going to be 100%, but at least it's going to be something. So peel this off, and I can just stick it to the bottom. It's okay if it's showing a little bit. This, and now I just want to make a little X right here so the bolts will go through and I won't have any issues when I go to put this on. Trim it a little bit. Try not to stab my leg. Okay, now we can put this handrail in place. Okay. Get rid of the dirt. Line it up. All these bolts. Look at that. Made a nice seal around them. Okay. Now I'm just going to measure and put this back where I originally measured. I'm put my big washer on, my small washer. You do this so you can move it around. I'm just going to center them as I tighten them. And big washer, small washer, and the nut. Big washer, little washer, nut. So over here, when I hit that rebar, I ended up trying to go through it because I wasn't sure if it was a rock or not. And when I did that, I ended up rounding this out a little bit. So the bolts are not going to work anymore, so I had to get a different type of anchor. Another thing you can do for preventative maintenance, because we're in New England, what could happen, and what's happened at my house actually, is water can get into those holes that you just drilled, and in the winter it can freeze and it can expand and it can break the concrete. So there's a couple options for you in order to prevent that. You can use silicone, like this is a black silicone, and you could put it on before the washers and the bolts, and then cover the washers and bolts with this in order to prevent the water from getting in there. But what I'm going to recommend is to paint it, maybe a Rust-Oleum or something like that, and you can maintain that over the years. It's going to do the same thing, just put it on thick and keep it maintained and you should be good. So when it comes to tightening these down, in the instructions they tell you to tighten it to 5 foot-pounds. I have a torque wrench. I don't expect that you're going to have one of those. Just don't over tighten these like crazy. Just make them nice and tight, and as you go you're going to want to check these for plumb. So what I'm going to do, because these are so close, I'm going to try not to use shims. If you need to, I would recommend flat plastic shims like this. You just put them underneath, sneak them under one side, and then cut them. So I'm gonna hold this plumb like this and tighten those bolts down. Again, if you wanted to do shims, I would recommend these. Just hold this side up, sneak this shim in here. You could also take the handrail off and put another washer underneath. That would work too. And then tighten this side up. This kind of clicks. Again, I know you don't have a torque wrench, but just don't go crazy tightening these down. So on this one, I ended up loosening this up a little bit and then sneaking a shim under there. And then you can just cut it and move on. Perfect. So for those of you who don't have a torque wrench, just use something like this. So what's happening here is this bolt is being pulled up, and like I showed you, that sleeve, as you pull that bolt up, that sleeve pushes down on that taper and expands against the concrete. Just want to go snug. That is perfect. Now it's just the stud is a little longer, so I'm going to cut that off just so it's about even with the rest of them. Metal blade on a Sawzall. Stop right there before I hit the rail. Because that one came out so nice, I'm going to cut the rest of these pretty much flush to the nut right there. Touch up. One side down, one side to go. Don't use your tape as a hammer. No rebar. Double check. And the reason, if you tighten up one side and it pulls it this way, and you tighten up the other side to make it plumb, is because this concrete's not perfect, and it pulls these metal pieces down a little bit, bends it into the shape that it should be, or conforms with the concrete. So that's kind of what I'm doing as I'm plumbing this. Get this outside tight, because that's the hardest part to get to anyways. Then okay, I can cut those bolts. Done. Last step, I'm just gonna paint this hardware so it's sealed up and it looks better. I'm gonna use Rust-Oleum oil-based. And I'm gonna try not to get it all over the stairs. Okay. Railings are done. I think they came out great. So if you want to see more videos like this, you can click hereish and hereish and check those out. If you haven't subscribed yet, definitely consider it. Thanks for watching. Mom, Dad, all set.